My name is Michael, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, making the time to join us. I wonder just how many vast wilderness areas remain still on planet Earth. Places, in fact, where there are very few lights. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our hosts, the couple Beverly and Peter Pickford, who are the authors and photographers of the incredible Wildland project. And we are very blessed that they're going to take us on an adventure through 4 of these last remaining wild places. And I'd love to ask them to start at the very beginning, how this all came about, how after 40 years of doing the work they did, they decided to go on this odyssey around the world to these vast wilderness areas. Over to you, Peter and Beverly. I hope you can hear me clearly. I hope you're well. And maybe you could just start at the beginning, how this idea came about.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, super to be with you. Where did it start? It started about 45 years ago when Beverly asked me, what do you really want to do? This is a slide that shows the lights at night around the Earth. I don't know if my cursor will come onto this. I'm technologically challenged. But if you see, you look across the where the equator would be, you can see that the jungles there's very little light. And then once you get to the polar areas, again, the light seems to change. And then we looked at this map of the world at nighttime with the lights, and we used that to sort of create our principal areas, because we wanted to have areas that weren't dictated by being a national park or something. We were looking for something that was massive, expansive, bigger than a single entity that you can hold in your head. You know, I'm South African. You can hold the idea of the Kruger National Park in your head. You know what it looks like. But if you take in an area that is, for example, we chose Namibia in Africa for our thing. And if you look at this map for the lights in Namibia, there's almost none. And that is what we were looking for. The entire coastline of Namibia was almost pitch black. And so that was a decision. Here's another slide. Let me show you.
I think it's important here to say that we decided, obviously speaking to people, everybody had their favorite wilderness, and it became really difficult, particularly with publishers, as to decide on what to include and exclude. So we chose one vast contiguous area in each continent. And so I think Peter can run through what they were.
This is Patagonia that we've got up on the screen at the moment. The extreme left-hand side is the Fjord Land. You can see the boundary with Argentina, between Chile and Argentina. That essentially runs just to the east of the Andes Mountains. So the Andes, the Fjord Land, and then the desert to the east of it. That was very obviously an area that we would think. But here's one that's very exciting. This place completely turned me on. That's Tibet. And it's gigantic. Absolutely gigantic. It's about 2,000 kilometers across and about 1,500 kilometers wide, and there's nothing. So yeah, we'll get to that later. But when we started looking at this, it was like the lights came on, but because they'd gone off. So yeah, it was very, very exciting to discover that.
And then in North America, we chose Alaska and the Yukon, which is the same if you see northern Alaska and the Northern Territories, particularly at night. In Europe, although we explored a lot of Scandinavia, we finally settled on Svalbard in the high Arctic. And then Asia, we chose the Tibetan Plateau, obviously. In Australia, it was the northwestern section of the Kimberley area, very, very sparsely populated area. And then, as Peter said, in Namibia, the Skeleton Coast. And we specifically chose that again because of the very, very small population, and the entire coastline is actually a declared national park. And then Antarctica, which self-explanatory.
We actually began in Antarctica. What we did for this project was we have a specific a Land Rover that's built specifically for outdoor photography. It's built for long distance camping or staying out there for a long time. So we got a shipping sponsor from Germany. Rick Mislini actually sponsored us the transport of our vehicle right around the world and ourselves for the entire project, which was very exciting.
Well, we couldn't have done it.
We couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah.
And they shipped our vehicle across to Argentina. We drove flat out down to Tierra del Fuego, and we got on a ship to Antarctica. And I just wanted to show you the covers. This is the cover of the book. That it took us 4.5 years to make this book. 4.5 years traveling around the world to make the book. And the cover came from Antarctica. So that's a place called Gold Harbor on South Georgia Island. But yeah, it was very exciting. I think the South African cover is next. We'll get to that one. That's in the Namib Desert. But let's go to Antarctica. Here, this is where we started the journey. And to explore Antarctica, you have to do it by ship. So we joined a couple of different expeditions. I think we went on two.
Yes, yeah, 2 different.
Yeah, we went on 2
weeks,
different expeditions, each 3 weeks. So we spent a total of a month and a half in Antarctica. And it really, I think it remains, for both of us, probably our favorite continent.
Everything was so terribly unexpected and new. Having grown up in Africa, nothing can prepare you for the landscape of Antarctica. So I think we have to go back.
Yeah, we're always wanting to go back. It's just the budget.
We worked as informal photography guides. So we did a trade-off because it's very difficult to actually take your photographs if you're working as a guide. So we had our time and then their time, and it worked very well for us. We were very, very, very lucky with that too.
Yeah, let me run you through a few of the exciting thing about Antarctica is that the influence of man is almost non-existent. There is some influence, obviously, on the islands surrounding the Antarctic Peninsula when there was whaling and that sort of thing going on in the 1800s and the early 1900s. There's some remnants of that left behind, but these days it's pretty much small research stations and the continent in its natural state, and that's incredibly exciting. It just really is absolutely remarkable to go into a place where the animals, number one, have no fear of you. It's remarkable to be in a place where animals have no fear of you. They don't see you as a predator. They see you as another animal, and it's so disconcerting as a human being. You know, you're another animal suddenly. We're not used to being like that. And here's a picture of a Antarctic fur seal, and he's telling me off. He's telling me, "You get out of here, chap. This is my spot." And, it was very humbling and exciting. I loved it.
What else?
Yeah, I've got lots of pictures. I'm going to share about 10 images from 4 of the destinations that we went to. We haven't got time for everything this evening, but
did you find that in Antarctica, out of all the wilderness places you went to, that was quite unique in that the animals were the most comfortable with you as humans?
Yes, definitely.
Other animal, yeah,
definitely. The only other place where animals, well, there were 2 other places really. Polar bears in the Arctic found us very interesting, that we were on the menu. And the other place that we were on the menu was in the Kimberley in Australia. The crocodiles definitely considered us food. And that's exciting. You know, it's interesting to be stalked by a wild animal because it has no fear of you, having not been hunted before. And yes, it's scary, but it puts things into a perspective that we very seldom have these days. That where wilderness is so pure that the animals regard you as just another animal, not a sort of ultimate species and something to be afraid of.
I think that the birds in the Arctic were also very accepting of us. One wouldn't say tame, but essentially you could walk and move among them, and they would just continue with what they were doing.
Yeah, this is the image from the cover. That's the full image from the cover. It's a place called Gold Harbor on South Georgia Island. This is actually very close to the place where Shackleton was rescued. Finally, he walked over those mountains in the background there.
And they're king penguins.
Yeah, and these are king penguins. And this is a small colony. There's only 10 or 15,000 birds there. There's colonies with 600,000. And it really is astounding to see life in that sort of thing. And I think this shows you how unafraid they are of you. It's, if you sit down and sit still, they're entirely curious. You're this really strange looking animal. You don't look like an elephant seal or a fur seal. You're something different. So they come up and peck at your clothes. And
the unwritten rule is that they can come to you. You can't approach them within a certain distance. And this is precisely what happened. The moment you sit down and you get on their level, then they come right up to you.
Yeah, it's
you could spend hours and hours just watching.
These are king penguins. So as you can see from the scale with Beverly sitting there, they're big animals, big birds, but there's a great variety of them. But the kings are the sort of totem species for South Georgia, I think, because they're so pretty and they're big, and they occur in extremely large colonies. The smaller penguins tend to have smaller colonies, except on one or two of the islands there's some big colonies, but they really are the big one. This is South St. Andrews Bay, I think.
This is St. Andrews Bay.
St. Andrews Bay, and this is a breeding colony. You can see the brown ones are the chicks and the adults, obviously, in their full plumage. But that photograph gives you an idea of the density. St. Andrews Bay, 600,000 penguins. It's quite remarkable.
Were you ever given the sense that what you were seeing was incredibly rare, and that because things are changing, if you come back in a while, it might not be like that? Was anyone around you saying, look, that glacier is changing, or the amount of penguins that you were seeing are different to what they were? Did you get that sense that you were also trying to capture and document a time and a wild place that could change?
I think that was very, very much the case in the Arctic.
In the Arctic, definitely.
We went to glaciers where our guide would tell us that, he was there 8 years ago, and the glacier was a kilometer longer or further out into the sea.
And this is a glacier that's 120 meters high and 5 kilometers wide.
He would show us the place, and certainly with the bears, I mean, we just struggled to find them, and we had to go further and further north. And guides would say to us, last year, this is where we would find them, this last year. And we had Ian Sterling on board one of our trips, who is one of the top polar bear scientists on Earth, and he had maps of where the ice was in previous years and where it was now. And in the Arctic, it was a constant thing and a constant concern and almost a panic, which it sort of drove one to feel we have to do something about this. We have to go back and communicate this to the world. And in the Arctic, it is changing, but it's far more gradual. In the Antarctic, it is far more gradual at present. I think it's just so much, there is a continent under Antarctica and so much more ice, whereas in the Arctic, there's no land.
It's on the sea.
It's just a great ice sheet. So obviously the melting is, and the proximity to the whole of the settled northern hemisphere is so much closer. But there's so much science behind this. It just isn't really time to go into it. But I think in the Antarctic, we just felt that we were constantly being reminded of how it was, how it can be, how it should stay. And I think that was the thing. We started to think about, the Serengeti and how important it was, because it has huge pressure. There's all the people, there's the tourism which is growing and everything else. And so it was what was in our mind constantly in Antarctica, because we were seeing it how it always was.
Except for the whales. The whales were not a fraction of what they used to be, but it's encouraging. They are starting to come back. Particularly the humpbacks are making a pretty good comeback. But the big whales like the fin whales and the blue whales, we saw very few. And, just the fin whales, for example, we only really caught up with them in the 1920s, mid-1920s, when we had ships with harpoons, explosive harpoons on the bow, and that could go faster than the whales could. Those whales go at about 25 to 30 knots, which is extremely fast in the water. And the old sailors with their rowboats could never keep up with them, so they escaped. And then suddenly they developed motorized boats with explosive harpoons. We killed 250,000.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
Sorry, Michael. Oh no, your reaction.
Yeah, it's
you're a whale lover.
Yeah, it's just we stopped doing it, fortunately, and that's really what our book is about. Is there's so much magnificence out there. We should be looking after it, and it's falling to our generations. I mean, Beverly and I are probably the end of a generation, but the younger generation should really be looking to it, because it's become critical in the period of our lifetimes. We're seeing such dramatic change to wilderness and wildlife. And if we stop caring about it, if we let it slip, it's going to go faster than people. A lifetime is nothing. It's a blink of an eye in the time of Earth's history, and we have the responsibility to look after it. And that's really why we made this book. I just want to go into the next photograph but we actually saw a whale on this day. It was snowing in Antarctica. This is Fournier Bay, I think.
Yeah, Fournier Bay.
Yeah, and this was one of the first days that we saw whales. It was a bit early because we went early in the season. And this whale came up. This is snow on the sea. It was snowing so hard, and the sea is so cold that the snow sat on the sea and didn't melt, and actually formed this, it looked like land with these fishes in it. And we were out there on the deck. The deck was very slippery. And suddenly, poof, through the middle of this comes this massive whale blow, and it's a whale down there. It was remarkable, absolutely fabulous. So
the Palmer Archipelago.
Yeah. So it was very exciting. Whales, I think, are a barometer that we are making some changes that are for the good. They are recovering. The ban on them has been effective. And I think that there's a lot more that, not particularly our generation, but the world to come will find that we can turn things around. I think there's certain things that we can't, but we can turn some things around. And that's really what our book is about. We don't want to be dismal and depressing in our ideas. We want to say that we have the opportunity. We have a magnificent Earth. It's still there. And we can go ahead and look after it and conserve it. And, there's this is a tiny little bird. He's that big. That's a Wilson storm petrel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a storm petrel. He's this big. And he lives out there in the ocean. And he relies on us not putting plastic out there, so that the krill survives. He doesn't start eating plastic. And that bird is incredible. He lives out there in this extreme weather, these massive waves, and he's completely comfortable and at home just by himself. That one little bird it's a remarkable thing. It's a remarkable thing.
I think this is the thing that is so humbling is, being out there in your double thick boots, double thick fur-lined boots, and all your waterproof gear and your beanie, and going back to the ship, and you have your warm cabin, And there is all this life out there which is perfectly comfortable, and if left alone will continue, will be healthy, and will thrive.
And that's really what Antarctica taught us, is that Antarctica is not messed with by humans. It's a continent that's under treaty. I forget how many nations have signed it, but it's quite a few at this point. And we've left it alone. We're using it for scientific research. And if we can do that with what wilderness we have left on the earth, then we have the opportunity to preserve and look after this magnificence. You know, I always use the Kruger National Park as my example when people say, well, you know, we've got some time. And I'm saying, I don't think you've got that much time. But, you know, when the Kruger was declared a reserve, 13 people visited it in the first year of its proclamation. 13, 1-3. And it's now 108 years later, 115 years.
1.6 million.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the 1.5 million people per annum go and visit that place. That's in the space of 100 years. Can you imagine how important these places, these things are going to be in 500 years, 1,000 years? Imagine how important it's going to be that we have conserved these things for the future of the earth. We have no idea of the relevance, the exponential relevance of conservation. And that's something that us human beings are really plagued by. We see things in terms of a lifetime, and that's too short.
I think we have to realize that we're one of the species on this earth. We're not the species, and without all the others, we're not actually going to survive.
I'm going to see, I think I'm, you know, I think that's the final image that I have from Antarctica. Again, it's a fulmar, and it just gives you an idea of the power of the continent, the incredible, it's remarkable to find life in a place like that. Absolutely remarkable. But when you find it in the profusion that exists down there, it just, you stand there with your jaw on your chest.
Do you find that the wilderness, great wilderness areas are really those that are inhospitable? You know, they're the deserts, they're these mountain plateaus, they are these hard to get to. Is that why they are still wild?
Without question. Yeah.
Definitely.
Without question. That is what defines them.
It's the hostility to man's occupation that keeps them wild.
The only problem is, of course, that we're getting better and better at surviving almost anywhere.
And we're getting more and more.
So I think for us, the point is we just have to decide. Governments have to decide. Politicians have to decide. The decision makers of the world have to decide. We need to set wildland aside. No future negotiation. We demarcate areas and we protect them.
And we have them. That was the remarkable thing about this project, spending 5 years looking on every single continent on Earth for vast areas of wilderness, not just, as I say, not just a national park, but something that was expansive, really, really big, that was the world as it existed always. And they're there. And that's the part that really is so interesting and fascinating. Here, I'm going to move on to, we moved from Antarctica up to Patagonia. And as I showed you in the earlier in the lights section, we concentrated on the sort of ridge of the Andes going south from Puerto Montt in Chile and Argentina. We went south from there all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. And because it's so hostile an environment, it's cold, it's wet, it's rainy, it's jungly, it's very steep-sided, it's hard for human beings, and it's wild. The interesting thing in Patagonia, though, was that most people associate wild with animals, and in Patagonia it's very hard to see the animals because they tend to be deep in the jungle or they're on the steppe. The things we saw most of were no, this is a little green fire crown.
The birds are magnificent.
Yeah, the birds are great,
and they are ever present. It's very often in a long walk in the forest, you would just hear bird calls. You would see probably no other life. because everything is in the undergrowth, and then the birds would fly around, and so that would sort of keep you going, because around the next corner you just might see another bird. This is a green-backed fire crown.
Yeah, it's a green-backed fire crown.
Yeah.
But then you get, these are the locals. This was the interesting part, is that the locals are very, very traditional. It's very mountainous, very steep-sided country. So roads are few and far between. There's one road in Chile and one essentially in Argentina that follow the range of the Andes south. And so the locals all get around on horseback, and they're very traditional. But the interesting thing is that when you have people that are traditional like this, and they get around on horseback and on foot, they have quite a profound impact on the animals, because most of these guys go around with dogs. And so we found that as soon as you got estancias or little puestos where there were a few locals, there would be a retreat of wildlife locally, but there would be a retreat of wildlife. So even on a small scale, we need to be aware that we make a dramatic effect on the environment around us. And but then this is down south in Patagonia, a very famous place called Torres del Paine. It's a national park, but it's beautiful. It really, that image is very much about what Patagonia feels like.
It's spectacular. Could you just touch on the wonderful initiatives that's going on there with farmland being converted? You talked about there are places that are giving you hope. Is Patagonia one of those?
Very definitely. We actually, I think we dedicated our book.
Because there's some pictures on there.
We dedicated our book to the people that are doing this. This is an image taken in one of the parks. It's the Tompkins Conservation. Chris and Doug Tompkins. Unfortunately, Doug passed away a year or so ago from hypothermia. He fell out of his canoe and died from hypothermia. But Chris is continuing the work. But they were both philanthropists, successful business people who turned what assets they had. They decided that they were going to. Doug was a mountaineer, very, very fond of South America, and Chris obviously followed with him down there. She was also she is very much into the outdoors, and they saw all this vast estancias, very, very big farms, and they said, well, why don't we buy them and start turning them into national parks? So agriculturally, they're very marginal, very fringe agriculturally. But if we returned them to their natural state, we could do something remarkable. And I think the latest National Geographic actually has an article on both of them and the work that they've done. But they've conserved millions of hectares of wilderness. They've created at least 6 or 7 national parks. They call themselves Conservation Patagonia. And what they've done, or Tompkins Conservation, what they did was they went and bought farms. This image here is a farm that they bought in Chile.
This is Park Patagonia.
And they created Park Patagonia, which is a massive park now because it joins a small national park in the south with a small national park in the north. And they bought this, Yenemini and something else, but they bought this big tract of land in the middle. And what it's done is it's created this remarkably diverse habitat. It goes from lowland lakes right through to the heights of the Andes and then high altitude plateaus. And they're conserving everything from animals that love ice down to the puma and rhea. You know,
what has happened is that the animals have come back. I mean, the viscacha was endangered. The puma is very much endangered down in South America. Guanaco, there's different foxes.
They've been doing this for 30 or 40 years, and it's really starting. They're starting to. It's really starting to gain traction. I think that the South Americans initially were very, very hesitant. They thought that the Tompkins were just coming in to create big private American farms and take away the national heritage. They did not believe that people were paying them to give them back.
To create national parks, and the people are much in support of it.
Yeah, now they really have presidential support, both sides, Argentina and in Patagonia.
And
so
these national parks are getting a lot of visitors now because they know that there were visitor centers and properly run campsites, and so I think it's also drawn in the local people, which is very different to creating a venue for international tourists and conservationists.
But it really gives one hope, Michael. You know, when you see what, you know, yes, they spent millions, but in terms of the world economy, it's a tiny little drop, and yet they have conserved these enormous and critically important areas of South America. As I say, 500 years from now, people are going to say, this is incredible. You know, look at what we've still got. And they did it with comparatively very little backing and very little money. I mean, it's a lot more than I have, but it's remarkable what can be achieved. So the Tompkins are very much our sort of role models of what can be done. We actually dedicated the book Wild Land to them because they are so unique in what they've actually not just talked about it, they've shared it, they've done it, they've made it happen. And that was really very impressive to us. I think there's a few more pictures here.
For a lot of conservationists, our hearts are in the right place, but it is always so difficult to know what to do next.
But this is very, very far south. There's one of the parks that they've created is Patagonia National Park. They've done it in association with other land philanthropists, people that have given money to buy land. This is Tierra del Fuego. This is looking from the Beagle Channel onto Tierra del Fuego. This is the kind of country that they are conserving. Here's another, but this is also taken in.
There's Perito Moreno.
Yeah, that's Perito. Is that Perito Moreno?
Yeah, national park.
Yeah, so that's a national park. Those are Guanaco, which is the South American, I would say, impala. If we were to look at the African equivalent, it's the most common wild animal, and it's found on the high altitude steppe. It's a relation of the llama. But this is the country this is also part of
it's Park Patagonia.
Park Patagonia, yeah. Really, and that's you get an idea there of the magnificence of the country that can be preserved. That it's still, I mean, if we look, this is a sweeping picture. That is all land that used to be farmland.
All estancia, and now the vegetation is also recovered.
But you can see that the impact of the estancia was so small that what the Tompkins did was just take down the fences, and it reverted. And that's how close we sit. Take down the fences and the land reverts, and within 20 years you get a national park. It's very exciting. It's very, very encouraging. And let's see. This is I just want to share a few more images of Patagonia with you. This is Lago Leones. Also in the Chilean side, it's a very remote place. It takes a day and a bit walking to get there.
I think it's Laguna San Rafael National Park.
Yeah, somewhere. But very, very, it's magnificent country and vast. Really, Patagonia, because of the mountains. You know, I was chatting to Doug around the fire one evening, and Doug Tompkins, and you know, I was talking about Park Pumalin, which was the first park that they created. And he said to me, Pete, you walked in, you got 1.5 kilometers in. That park extends for another 90 kilometers to the border. Can you imagine what's in there? He said, I'll fly you over. We never did get to fly, but he said, I'll fly you over so you can see. But this is what it was like inside of there. It's just remarkable that there is so much wilderness out there. And we just, if we take action and conserve it, we can really make a difference. This is one of my favorite images from the book. It's a huemili. It's a extremely endangered South American antelope, and it likes ice.
is completely unafraid.
Yeah,
Speaking
and
of,
this is
it's so scary because you know that it's dangerous for it
yeah,
to actually approach you as a human being. You
this
just want
is
to shoo it away.
this is in the deep south of the Chilean Fjord Land. It's in Bernardo Higgins National Park, which is on the edge of the ice cap. I don't know if the people that are tuned in are aware, but in Chile, as you move south, there's an ice cap that extends from the mountains into the sea and it blocks all access. You can go so far south and then no more, because on the other side there's land again, but you cannot get past the ice cap. This is just the beginning of the ice cap, and these deer love the fringes of the ice. I'm not sure exactly why, what it is that they like about the habitat, but they were so unafraid of us because they just don't see people down there. It's so remote that we would lie down. They come and lie next to us like dogs.
This is at Bernardo Higgins Glacier, and I think the reason that there are humuli there in a wild state is because it's so remote. I mean, it took us an entire day's boat trip, having gone to the closest point on the edge of landfall into the archipelago to get here, and I think that is why we found this.
Spectacular.
I see I'm talking too much, but I just want to run through a few of the other destinations. I've got two more I want to cover with you. Tibet, as I said, was just enormous and
go through the pictures, maybe.
Beautiful. These are kiang. These are wild ass or zebras. They like the zebra of Asia, and that image from the day I started photography, I had images like this in my head. And I was just so happy that we were actually able to capture this image. This was taken on my birthday in Tibet, and it was a real birthday present. We'd camped out on this plane. Yeah, we'd camped out on this plane, and don't go too fast. I want to explain the picture. But we'd camped out on this plane. It was absolutely bitterly cold. It was so cold that our tent froze from our breath on the inside, and we could lift it up. It was solid. It was this ice block from the inside. But we were presented with that image in the morning. This is a traditional Tibetan woman wearing jewelry. We just came and we love the shot because it has the wistful aspect of that we feel is at the core of Tibetan, where the Tibetans are at the moment. They're wistful. They're longing for their land. I don't think that they have a lot of chance of retaining it, but they're very, very passionate and very deeply associated with the land. We didn't look at the urban areas. We looked at the nomads. This woman is part of a nomad community, and they live in a land without fences, which is really absolutely remarkable. This is one of the high altitude lakes. All these photographs are taken anything above 4,000 meters, between 4,000 and 5,500 meters. So it's terribly high. The air is very, very thin. It's very cold. But the fact that it is a savanna on the scale that it is just remarkable. It really, we were very excited to find Tibet. And the Chinese authorities have made massive reserves up there. They're really, the Changtang, you know the names better.
Changtang, the Hokel, and the Sangyan Yuan are three massive reserves, which is a relief and a gift, considering the incredible developments that they are also pushing into Tibet in the hydroelectric electricity areas and mining and that sort of thing. The development is huge. So the fact that they've declared these reserves is a huge relief and gift. And particularly critical when you go there and you see what is still wild and can be preserved.
This is I just put this in because this was a highlight day. We were photographing, just walking around photographing woolly hares actually, and we noticed some movement, and there with this animal. This is a Pallas's cat. It's about the size of a domestic cat, and I wonder how many of your viewers can see that there's two cats there. The second one looking at you is often missed, and that's why we missed them. We were close by, we didn't see them until they moved. But very exciting, very beautiful little animal. We then spent 3 days camped out here photographing these two. But this is very much what the Tibetan Plateau looks like. That's a kiang. It's, as I say, the zebra or wild ass of Tibet. There's big herds of them. Once you get out into these areas where the plains are vast away from the roads and the infrastructure, it's like the Serengeti. There really are just herds everywhere of the kiang, of the goa, and a few other animals. This is an image of Tibet that not many people have seen or think of it as Tibet, but it's like a Grand Canyon view of there's an area here that is obviously sand, much more sandy and more erodible, and because it's close to the Himalaya, it gets a lot of weather, and the erosion has caused this really dramatic landscape, very, very similar to the Grand Canyon in America, and on the same sort of scale, but far less known. And we were very excited to find that. And this is actually being preserved. There is a reserve there. And this is typical of Tibetan weather. This is what you wake up to in the morning. Your yaks are frozen over. Remarkably stoic animals, but I love the image because the stoicism and the cold really are shown to advantage. I think Beverly's trying to look up where that.
It's the Langtsen Tsangpo River Valley.
Langtsen Tsangpo River Valley was the previous image. I don't know how to go backwards on this.
And that is
that one.
It is also like that because it is right next to the Himalaya. So basically, it gets all of the weather without the precipitation.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. This is a little owl we found in the snow. He looks as miserable as I felt. It was cold. But I just loved the image with the snow falling. And that was what we found about Tibet, is that right next to the road, there were no fences and wildlife coming and going, just like the Serengeti. And this is such a beautiful animal. This is a wild yak, wild. So he's very, very different to the domestic yak. You can see he looks much more like the Spanish bullfighting bull than the domestic yak, and he has the same temperament. They're very aggressive, very assertive, and yeah, you keep your distance with them. But it was really wonderful to find them, and we found them in pretty good numbers in certain areas in Tibet. They seem to like the mountains rather than the flat steppe, but we found decent herds, 20 animals with youngsters and that sort of thing, and fairly frequently. They weren't uncommon. So
we were very pleased to have our guide Tenzin with us, because he could recognize from a long distance which was a wild yak. We'd have completely different behavioral techniques, and we'd have to crawl up to these on our bellies below ridges, and as opposed to just walking among them.
But that's the wild yak. Those are domestic yak. But you know what's interesting is that the Tibetan Plateau, with all its development, it's the Buddhist mantra of respect for life that has really ensured that this wilderness remains intact. It's an association. The people are there. Those are domestic yaks in this wilderness, vast wilderness, and the people are there moving with their yaks through it. But the Dalai Lama in 2006 issued a statement to the Tibetan people that they really have to start completely respecting their wildlife and their wilderness, because those are other souls that are on the earth with them. And that just transformed it. It stopped the hunting. The people started reporting foreigners. I'm afraid to say that Westerners from Canada going in there for mining exploration. The Chinese were hunting, and they were hunting, and the Tibetans turned around and said, listen, the Dalai Lama has said, we need to respect this. We want you to stop. And it's really changed the dynamic of the place. And that's a place that has no laws, no fences, no game rangers, no nothing. It's the paradigm of the people's respect that has changed the place. Okay, and I'm going to go quickly. I see I'm running out of time. Quickly to Namibia, our favorite continent. This is where we were born. This is where we've spent most of our time. And here we chose the Skeleton Coast because it is such a vast, it's 3,000 plus kilometers of coastline. And Namibia recently set a precedent a few years ago, actually, by declaring the entire coastline a national park. There's no other country in the world that's done that. So the Skeleton Coast, almost for its entirety, with the exception of the few 2 or 3 towns that are on its the small coastal port areas, the entire coast is a national park. And that's again an example of what can be achieved with the will. Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that you find in the Skeleton. It's very arid. We wanted a place that was different and arid, that supported wildlife. That's in the Hoornhoek River Valley. Those are the Etendeka Mountains. Beverly and I spent a year here working on the Himba book on the Himba people in the 1980s. We were the first people in after the war. And the change is dramatic. There's a lot more people and a lot less elephants. And that is one of the things that this valley, particularly, the elephants are suffering terribly as a result. Their numbers are declining and declining and declining. The populations are small, less than 30, and they're going down, which is very worrying.
I think the thing is, though, is that it's still so remarkable that the wildlife is there. And it's exactly what you said in the beginning, Michael. It's only because the landscape is so inhospitable. But again, isn't it a miracle that you find elephants there at all? And for this reason, we have to stop and consider what we're going to do about it. We have to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, imagine not living in a world without this. I mean, we live in a world without woolly mammoths. I'd love to have seen a woolly mammoth, but we live without them. But why would we ever let this go? It's beyond me. And that's really why we made the book. And I just, in coming to the close, I wanted to tell your viewers that we actually, whilst we were making the illustrated book, I was also writing every day because I felt that I really wanted to get to a larger audience than just the visual audience. So we have a book coming out at the end of this year called To the Edges of the Earth, which is the written journey. It's the written story of this journey that we undertook to make this book. This image is just particularly, I love it because it speaks to me of where the rhino stands. It's on the cusp of disappearing. It's a shadowed animal and it's prehistoric. It's been here forever. How can we possibly on our watch let that happen? I'm not going to. Just not going to.
Thank you. That was very, very beautiful. Are you almost, sorry.
Yeah, there's a few more images. I'll just shoot through them, but I see my time is done.
Well,
and
thank you very much for inviting us, Michael. I don't think we realized that we had so much to say.
This is the written book. It's not available yet. It will be available in December. As I said to you, I think earlier, that if you want to pre-order, we will accept pre-orders. Just click on the website and you can pre-order it. But we don't know the price or the shipping cost yet.
I think that the written work has got so much more than we can say, because we met so many interesting people whose views are included in the book, and so many indigenous people who lived in places that we only visited. And so I think we just felt that we needed more than the photographic book. We needed to tell the story because it wasn't just our story.
Before we're opening it up to questions, so if any of you have questions, please won't you type it in the chat function or in the Q&A, and I'll try and get through as many as we can. I know we don't have much time. But firstly, you mentioned earlier when we were speaking in person about the rarity of these wild spaces. And when you look back after these 5 years, how do you sum it up? Why do we need to conserve these areas? What is it that makes them more rare than anything else?
Well, I think that's exactly it, Michael, is that when we look at why we are losing wild space, why we are the urgent need for conservation, because as soon as we lose the space, we lose the species. But it's not just the species, it's the magnificence of the earth in its pristine condition. And when I look, for example, at what President Trump has opened up the north slope of Alaska for oil and gas exploration. If you look at the Alaska pipeline, that was put in at an immense cost to the environment. And it's lasted 40 years. It's about to run out. And we have done some damage. We have done damage there that will last forever. It's irreparable. We cannot change it. We've changed that environment, period. And the point that came across most strongly after spending 5 years in the wilderness is no matter what we human beings want to take from the land itself is more rare than anything we'll take from it, be it gold, diamonds, golf courses, high-rise buildings, a nice marina, oil, whatever it is. The land itself is rarer than any of those commodities or minerals or things that we want from it. And therefore, if it's rarer, why are we not seeing the value of that rarity? And that is really what came across, that wild land is the rarest precious commodity we have left on earth. It's the rarest of all things.
It's also irreplaceable.
So it's irreplaceable. Once we've changed, we can't go back, you know. And so if Mr. Trump wants to take oil out of the North Slope, then he is changing the scope of America's history forever. And he is putting aside for his own pocket and for the pocket of the contemporary American, he is putting aside the wealth of every single American to come. And that's not fair. That's not right.
I also think that we feel quite strongly that for our own, as a human race, for our own spiritual and psychological well-being, we need wilderness areas. We need to be able to find places we can go where we're not in domination, where we can find our historical landscape, where we can recognize the place that we came from.
Do you there's quite a few questions coming through that I want to try and get to. I completely concur with what you're saying, and I think it's incredibly inspiring and meaningful. Meredith was saying here that she really found that the way you use positive language instead of doom and gloom, was that what you set out to inspire people with beauty, that they fall in love with these places instead of just and wanting.
No, it inspires us. You know, that's what we're trying to tell the world, is it's inspirational. If you know, I think this is the fabulous thing about lockdown, is we suddenly decided or realized how important it is to be able to step outside, just outside. And let's take that idea, just stepping outside. Suddenly the entire world realized this is vital to my sanity. Now, if we take that idea and expand it to the whole of humanity and our earth, why can't we extrapolate that very simple idea? Yes, let's extrapolate it. It's good for us. It makes us feel wonderful.
I also think that there's so much doom and gloom on the planet right now. And the only way we can get away from it is to step outside, is to go and sit on a rock looking over the sea, to go for a walk in the mountains. That's how we escape the doom and gloom.
It's a mirror to our souls. And essentially, I think our souls want to be happy.
And I think you've achieved that. You've obviously inspired thousands of people. You said there were 30,000 books printed in 5 different languages. Can people get them in every continent in different languages in terms of wildland before this one comes out? Where do they first find wildland?
Well, Wildland is available through our website. We're sold out, unfortunately, completely sold out in the UK and Europe. We still have some copies we sold out in Australia. We still have some copies in the United States.
They come up on Amazon.
And we have copies in Africa. We still have copies here, but if you're happy to pay the shipping to wherever you are, we'll do that. It's what we just shipped a book to Greece yesterday. It was $50, quite a lot.
Yeah.
But
it's if you start on Amazon, because copies come up, and I'm not really sure how the publishing world works. We even sold into China, which was a real breakthrough. I think,
we got a Chinese edition, which was very exciting.
To persuade the Chinese to protect their land was, well, anything we could do.
But no, we do have copies. You have a look at wildlandphoto.com. and you can see where to buy the book. If it's not in the area that you're in, let us know and we'll try and find one for you.
I think there's a email address.
And To the Edges of the Earth, when do you think that will be out?
That'll be out in December. This coming December, we're hoping to get in just before the Christmas market. So, but if you'd like that, the only place you can pre-order it is on the wildlandphoto.com website. There is a shop section. You'll see you can click onto the edges and just if you click, it emails me. Just give me your address or Beverly your address, and we'll be in touch with you as soon as we have the scheduled publication date and the costs, including shipping.
I will already see Rose here saying, I would like 5, please order them. So I'll pick
Thank you.
Just a very quick question. Just trying to see if I've missed any here very quickly. The one Ian wanted to know with regards to the endangered buck in Patagonia, why are they so endangered if this region is so inaccessible to humans? Are they just not many left?
That's simply because they're endangered because they never occurred in large numbers, and their habitat is now restricted entirely to the fjord lands of Chile on the cold side of the Andes Mountains. So they used to extend quite a lot further up on both sides, but their habitat, because of human intervention, has shrunk tremendously.
I think in our entire time down to the Burnout or Higgins Glacier and inside the national park, we probably saw 15.
But so, the other issue is that they're so tame.
That's very, very small numbers for, and that is as I mentioned, they occur there because of the fact that it is so remote and inhospitable, whereas they used to occur in much greater numbers and across the whole of southern Patagonia.
But I think that the fact that they are so unafraid of humans made them easy to slaughter.
It's very understandable. Look, there's a few more questions about how did you travel in Chile from Puerto Montt to Patagonia if there were no roads, but I'm going to urge people to buy your book because I'm sure you'll explain how you got around and how you took
there are roads, but we walked a lot, horseback
and ferries.
And ferries,
we took ferries in the archipelago, or we hired a boat to take us across the water.
And Deirdre quickly wanted to ask you before I close, she said, if you had to choose one of those 7 places out for South Africans to go and visit outside of Africa, which one would be on the top of your list?
Depends what your priority is and what your budget is. Antarctica is amazing because it is the one continent on Earth that remains pristine, but it's expensive to visit because you have to do it on an expedition ship. I would say that if you were working on a more limited budget, Tibet is difficult to get to because the permissions are hard to come by. It takes a lot of red tape and bureaucratic approvals before you can get in there. It took us a lot of working to get all our permits in there. I would probably say Alaska and the Yukon in Canada. These are you want to you need time because it's big country.
It's very accessible though. There's
It's accessible.
Ferries everywhere.
And it's still wild.
And, you know, one can hike for days and days and days. There's just the bear, being aware of the bears, of the grizzlies, and use bear sprays or go with a guide, because the guides can carry a weapon, which you would hopefully never use, but it's safe, and you can go a lot of places with vehicles and then hike out. You can hike out for.
If you're prepared to walk, it's great country.
You can also be dropped by airplane into any of the wilderness areas and then walk out for as long as you want.
Well, thank you so much. I see Felix just joined from the UK and he said, sorry, he got the time wrong. So just to everyone, this is being recorded and we will put it up on all the social media platforms so you can share with family and friends. And thank you, both of you. I feel very inspired, from, you know, the Tibetans who are talking about respect for nature, to Patagonia, to one family of philanthropists who are really inspiring, you know, those with means to make a difference, and to a country like Namibia who've preserved, you know, just showing us that it is possible, and no matter on what scale, is incredibly inspiring. And thank you for doing what you're doing. Really looking forward to this, and we'll stay in contact. Best of luck. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you, Michael. I'd just like to end off saying to everybody who's watched it, don't think that you can't do anything. Your little bit makes a huge difference.
And also thank you to Michael. What you're doing.
Yeah, you're an example of it.
So thank you. Without you, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks a lot. Have a great evening. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.